ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በምዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Good evening.
Good evening, doctor.
Yes, how is everybody? You know, most of this has been covered previously. Just to remind ourselves, what is change? What is business change? Why should organizations change? Because of course, you know that whether you like it or you don't like it, change is there. Every day it is change. The best thing is just to see how you can manage that change and make the organization benefit out of it. Because change is inevitable. Maybe you may not like it or you may like it. I always say from the time you sat down there 10 minutes ago, a lot of change has taken place. Some of them is reversible, some can be reversed. You know, some is planned change, others is unplanned change, things that you don't have control over. And that's how change is in business. So things change, and therefore, especially when you talk about the triggers of change that are more powerful, especially from the business environment, then the best is to be able to see how we can manage that change and steer the organization so that, because the organization is a going concern, so the organization continues to offer services and products into the organization. The other time we were discussing about COVID and airline industry, and we said now most airline industries, although now it's like the world is managing COVID now and economies are opening back slowly. But previously there was last 2 months, no air transport, completely shut down. Only cargo planes. That's a change. The airline industries may not be able to, to do anything apart from to adjust and see how they can be able to manage, hoping that once the change is over, things will be okay, and then the firm will go back to its business and be even better than it was before the change. The same is happening to many organizations, not just the airline industry. A lot has changed, and maybe we'll never go back to that normal. That thing we are calling the normal. We'll never go back to that normal because that normal is not possible. We have changed and we have moved to a different level from where we are interacting. You'll be shocked that previously there has been a lot of transport, people moving and traveling, going for meetings, right? Now, what some managers are wondering is, why did we not know that we can hold meetings without basically being physically together? And therefore, after this, you'll find a lot. Many organizations will stop that kind of traveling because it's also expensive. So you are more likely to find some of these meetings scaled down. Only very, very key meetings that you cannot operate when you are not in the same room. You'll be shocked. Very, very many even seminars and conferences may be operating align. And this is now what change brings in an organization. So what is change? Change is an alteration of the status quo. If the status quo has been altered, then you say that change has taken place. That means moving from one state of nature to another state of nature, whether temporary, whether permanent, whether semi-permanent. It is still change. But what is important is that as managers, you should be ready, should be observing what is happening outside, so that you can be able to realize not when change is coming, so that you prepare. Otherwise, if change just finds the organization unprepared, it is dangerous. If change finds people unprepared, it is dangerous. It can hurt the organization, it can hurt the people. So through observing the environment, of course, you've done environmental analysis. Managers should be able to know what are the trends that may bring change in the organization, and see how they can be able to deal with them. So organizational change is now the modification and transformation of the organization structure, strategy, processes, goods, services, and so forth. Right? Any alteration, any modification on the way the organization does its business, then that qualifies to be organizational change. Because, of course, for example, when you look at just processes, when processes are affected, it means the chain of events are also affected. And therefore, those chains of events must be properly managed, so that the firm can continue its mandates. There are so many definitions you can talk about. Creation of imbalances. Organizational change implies the creation of imbalances in the existing pattern of situation. Those existing pattern of situation, when they are altered, then it means that modification has to be taken care well, because alteration means an adjustment that may either bring positive or negative impacts on the organization. Therefore, the organization must do some readjustments to make sure that the firm is still competitive and it can be able to execute its mandate. And what is change management? Maybe it's the conscious and concerted initiative effort. Conscious in the sense that management must consciously, they sit down and plan how to deal with the uncontrollable forces that are bringing the shifts in the environment. So it does not just come by good luck or by bad luck. It's organized. So you are saying it is conscious. There should be a pattern of events that takes place so that the management can be able to deal with those changes. You can also say that it is the approach of transitioning individuals, teams, organizations to a desired future state. That's what we are calling. It's a structured approach. Yes, it is organized. It is structured. It means it is well organized to transitioning individuals, organizations from a current state to a desired state. Right? So it means to prepare to support individuals, teams, organizations in preparing for that future change. Again, it's conscious effort to make sure that the firm faces the future stably. So you can have so many definitions, process of organizing, coordinating of that environment to ensure that the process of change are implemented. Are implemented according to the plans. That's why we are saying it is conscious. That's why we talked about policies and procedures. Right? And then now, what is strategic change management? Yes. Now, this one now directly falls on our scope of study. Right? It is now dealing with the goals, objectives, mission, strategy of the organization to make sure that it meets its mandate. So there's a lot of literature here, and you can be able to study much about them. Of course, what are the forces of change? You call them triggers of change. These are the forces that precipitate change. We have what we call external forces, and we have what we call internal forces. Most of the external forces fall under PESTEL, which you know very well. We've even done PESTEL analysis, SWOT analysis, capability analysis. I think you've done that. PESTEL means political, economic, socio-cultural, technological, ecological, and legal forces. So under each one of those, you'll find there are different aspects. For example, if it's economic, you'll find prices, finance issues, taxation a little bit, although taxation is more political, right? If it's socio-cultural, you'll find demographic issues there, culture, and so forth. If it's political, yes, you'll find leadership and governance in the country, political parties, and so forth. So these are external triggers of change that precipitate the change in organization. So when we are doing environmental scanning or environmental monitoring, the management should put their eyes on those small items. They are called elements in the elements in the environment, so that in case of any change, whether it is permanent or it is temporary, the management are aware. Now, sometimes we may not need to change, we may not need to do anything based on the change we are facing, especially if the change is too minute, it's too small, and it doesn't have a lot of implications for the organization. But if the change has big implications to the organization, then the management must have a strategy to deal with that change, either by adaptation, adaptation, and so forth, to be able to fix those challenges. And then, of course, there are also internal forces, which are eminent to the firm, that also affect, that also trigger change in the organization. We have human resources, we have managerial behavior, managerial decisions, we have things like strategies, things like visions, our internal objectives, and so forth. Things within the key suppliers, not suppliers, but the key stakeholders. For example, when you talk about, okay, management are also part of the key stakeholders. When you are talking about the owners of the business, those are the shareholders, they are counted to be inside the organization. So those are environmental internal forces that take place. Yes, more external force, that is pastel there, and internal forces, more of them: money, machinery, work, materials, and so forth. These are internal forces that trigger change in the organization. Therefore, they need to be properly checked. Now, we have three major levels of change in organization. We have what we call integral change, that's within the person, and the physical move a person or the individual. Right? Because the individual unit, because it is the individual who is directly affected. For example, if there is a job assignment, there's a physical move from one department to another, from one station to another, from one branch to another. That is called individual level change. It is not significant to the organization, it is significant to the person. When an employee has been moved from one job to another, or from one branch to another, the firm is not, the big firm may not even know whether it happened. The general manager may not even know, so that might be more of operations. And then you have group level changes that are done within the departments and the groups within the organization, the sections, that may affect things like workflow, job design, and all that. And these changes are a little bit powerful, therefore it's into the attention of the management, and they monitor what is happening. For example, workflows can affect the performance of the whole organization. And therefore, they are in the eyes of the management. And then lastly, you have organization changes. These are the ones that now directly affect the organization and threaten, in a way, the existence of the organization. And therefore, these are the ones that now the management must be very, very careful when dealing with, because they can easily, yes, Samuel.
You said that change could be structural, or it could be a change in terms of products or services. So my question emphasizes on change in products or services. When do we call a change happens in terms of product or services? Is it when we institute a strategy of liquidation, or these defensive strategies, or a diversification strategy, or is it simply a change in products? I want to emphasize on this question.
Yes, Samuel is asking, what is product change? What is product stroke a service change? Because a product is a general that captures both the physical and the non-physical. Okay, who can answer for that for us? What is a product change, for example? Anybody who can assist? Remember, today is our last day and people have to participate. I know I normally check attendance. Remember what is going to happen to those people who don't answer questions. Anybody can answer, please feel free, raise your hand, put your mic on, and tell us what is product. What does it mean? Product change. No hand up. Okay, product change, basically, what you've described is part of product change. You can change the shape of a product. You can change the packaging, still is part of change. You can change the price of a product. You can change the mechanics of a product. Maybe you change the formula for manufacturing. All that is part of product change. Right? So it's wide, including diversifying, that is coming up with a completely new product within the portfolio or outside the portfolio. It's still part of product change, including retrenchment. If your portfolio was big Then you minimize the portfolio. That means you remove away some products and remain with only the products that are performing well. Still, that is product change. So it's a wide range of activities that affect the product and the service per se. For example, if you're talking about the college now, the college has postgraduate studies or students or programs and undergraduate programs, right? If today you are to start a course in public health, you are diversifying, therefore you are doing product change. That means for the college to do public health, it must have good laboratories. That's a change. You see now product change brings other changes in the process and so forth. So all that is part of product change. Now, if it is at the School of Health, public health, and it wants to do away with it, that's still product change on the other hand. But anything that affects the physics and anatomy of a product or a service is considered as product change. I hope I'm clear there. Samuel, are you comfortable with that? Any change, any modification is part of product change or service change. So those are the levels of change I was talking about. So management must always be on the lookout, especially for the second and the third type of change. It's very taxing, and therefore it can easily affect a lot of, it can easily affect the performance of the organization. So management must make sure that they're observing. They don't remove their eyes from that observation. Oh, sorry. Okay, we are here. Types of change. There are also many types of changes. We have what we call strategic change. Like now, when you are dealing with a corporate strategy, you are changing this, changing the vision, corporate strategy, grand strategy. That's a strategic change. Means long-term change, right? Long-term change. Changing the plant and machinery, right? The plant and machinery is a capital-intensive investment. Of course, the life and the life and of most plant and machinery, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. This is strategic change. And then we have also structural change. We talked about organizational structure the other day. For example, changes in process. Process is part of the structure. Remember, we said structure is the relationship between different aspects. Yes, Shimeles.
Okay, Doctor, sorry, before you pass to the process-oriented change, regarding this strategic change, because when you think about strategic, it is a composition of not only mission, those other vision and objective values like this. So structural change means, is it only the change in the mission, or it might be vision or values and objectives?
Strategic change is not just about the strategy and the mission. The word strategy means long term in this case. That is why I've said change of plant and machinery is a strategic change. It is long term, right? That's why I was saying that a plant and machinery may take 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. That's definitely a long period of time. So any change that you make that captures the long-term operation of the farm qualifies to be strategic change.
Sorry, Doctor. My question, I got you now. But the reason why I would like to mention this question is because you mentioned that change, structural change, you said, change in the mission when acquired, you said. So that's why I got a doubt and I raised this question. Now I understand from your answer, thank you. But the reason why I would like to ask this question is because of the statement.
Okay. So you're now comfortable?
Yes, I'm comfortable. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So I was explaining structural change. Okay, I was saying we talked about organizational structure the other day. And we said that structure is a framework that holds the organization together. You know, for example, we talked much about centralization and decentralization, right? Issues of centralization and decentralization are a structure because they affect the overall structure of the organization, the overall relationship between departments within the organization, right? Then we also have people-oriented changes. Those may affect mostly the people. It is still under structural because the people are the people represent the departments within the organization. Then we may also have planned change. As you can see there, this reorganization. I'm just checking through this because I'm sure we did this, and most likely even we used the slides here, and you still have them, I guess, since last semester. So plan change is deliberate action whereby the management have a deliberate decision to change part of the organization. The opposite of that is unplanned change, right? Whereby you don't plan, but it happens. There's also what we call a deliberate change, although deliberate change is more of a planned change. There's also, okay, this is a planned change, you don't plan for it, but it happens. There's also what we call realized change or imagined change. It comes as a result of the interaction of the organization with the environment. Right? So all these are different types of change. Many. These are just examples. You can get very many examples of change. Maybe how do you deal with managed change? Managed means organized, organized change. And we've seen this, and John Cotter model of change is one of the most used way of identifying organized change in an organization. The development, and also this goes to the planning process. Managed change, organized change is planning, right? So this is planned change, because planned change is organized in such a way that it is systematic, it is structural, it is, conscious. So you talk of developing goals and objectives, look for agents of change, diagnose, select methodology of application, develop a plan, implement. Right? Once we implement, to follow up is basically what we've done under the, for example, the strategy formulation and implementation process is an example of a managed change. The strategic model is a good example of a planned change, just like this one. It shows how managers sit down and out of their own wit make a deliberate effort to bring change into the organization. The same to this, implementing successful changes can lay in a change model, the process of unfreezing, changing, and rephrasing. It's also an organized way of implementing change in organization. That means you need to prepare the people first, prepare the environment, then do the change. After doing the change, then take the organization back to operating, let's say, freezing, changing, freezing scenario. Maybe how can you easily introduce change to people? Through education and communication, through participation. If the people participate, it becomes easy. through facilitation and support. Right? If you facilitate the people, that's why now you find when change is taking place, the role of the manager becomes key. He should be there to support the employees. Through negotiation, through manipulation, of course, manipulation is not the best, but if everything has been done and people are still resisting change, then they can be manipulated. Especially if the change is a radical change for the better of the organization, including coercion. You know, if everything has been done well and time is passing, resources are being spent, and people are resisting change, then you can try to use some force, some minimum force, to make sure that people accept the change and move on. That's a continuation of that. The use of groups, you can group people, the use of leadership, now strategic leadership for that matter, to give the direction. You can use what is called a punishment and rewards. Those who accept, reward them. Those who refuse to accept, you punish them, and so forth. These are different ways. Okay, but of course, in any change, you may not fail to face resistance, because human beings are conservative in nature. We human beings are conservative. We like doing only what we know and what we are comfortable in. So any effort to change our status quo is resisted. So the tendency for human beings to be conservative is what is called resistance to change. Of course, depends on how change has been brought. If it's been brought through the right ways, then it means that it will be successful. Resistance may be minimal or not available at all. Right? But if the change has not been brought in the right way, or if the change affects very much the status quo of the people, they are more likely to resist. So again, our management must use their ability, their wisdom, their experience to deal with resistance to change. Because if this is not dealt with, then the change will not be successful. We normally say, the Carl Lewin says that there are forces for change and forces against change. And those forces are always fighting one another. The forces for change, the forces against change. So for the change to happen, the forces for change must be powerful more than the forces against change. Now the forces against change is the resistance to change that come from the people, from the institutions. Because we have individual resistance, we have group resistance, we have organizational resistance. So the management must deal with those three types of resistance for the change to be successful. Why do people resist change? Right. It's a very obvious reasons why people resist change. If there's no participation, if they are not properly briefed, if there's no support, if there's no preparation, then people will resist. We always say that unless the hearts and the minds of the people are ready, then no meaningful change can take place. So for any change to take place, must deal with the hearts, the minds of the people. That's why when there's a major change coming, you start with creation of awareness. In seminars, in memos, in notice boards, that we are moving this direction. We are going to move starting from tomorrow, or starting from a certain day, or we have started moving in this direction. So these are some of the reasons why emotional resistance may be in terms of fear. People fear. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of suspicion. There's insecurity. People feel insecure. They are going to lose their power, their money, their whatever. Then we also have what we call rational resistance to change. lack of information, right? That's why we say that information is key, communication is key, awareness is key if resistance is to be dealt with. Economic forces, maybe money issues, psychological forces, fear, social forces. If all these forces threaten the stability of the people, then expect change to come. Maybe what are the symptoms of the resistance? When you're implementing change, then how can you realize when people are not cooperating? There's no cooperation, then it means people are resisting. Hostility, people become aggressive, right? When you say you want to close one branch because business is not good, people become hostile and aggressive. They think you've come to finish them, but you've not come to finish them, because if the branch is not performing, if you continue keeping them there, what do you pay? So these are things that absenteeism, anxiety, strikes. These are ways that you can be able to realize that there are challenges. Maybe does resistance has benefits? Yes, there are some benefits too. It's not always negative. The process of change. Of course, we said managers must be watching. So if you find there is resistance, it means there may be things you are not doing in the right way. It also helps in identifying problem areas, because these problem areas are the ones employees feel shy of, right? That's why you find the employees going for strikes and picketing and so forth and so forth. Plus all those benefits, yes. It ensures quality service, it ensures goodwill. It brings a platform where the management can engage the employees in case they don't do that, where stakeholders can talk. It also improves performance, because if the issues are addressed, then efficiency and effectiveness increases. Okay. That's all about change. Maybe I can pick one or two questions. Any questions about change? Maybe. Any question about change before we move on to the next step? Yes, Samuel.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. I think the concept is well understood, and I can understand how organizational change happens in an organization, especially when it is intended change or even unintended, or it's like a first kind of change. But then the current issue we have, that of COVID, where almost the whole world is affected, that change happens to all the companies. And then the effect of change on the organizational planning or even strategic direction change somehow completely to some of them, the way it should happen, maybe boosting their businesses, especially for those like example, the platform we are using, Zoom, which has boomed its business because it's one of the tools that COVID has pushed them to be one of the top performers. But then we also said like the airline industries are affected highly, most of them even closing business. So do you think it's good to introduce change? I mean, it's already we are on a change, but to introduce new ways of doing things, maybe new strategies before even COVID is gone for good, or companies should be maybe refrain until things settle down.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, well, this kind of change was not anticipated, and therefore it was not planned change. But once it happened, now firms had to respond to the change. Now, you find that only those firms that were monitoring and were, you know, were stringent enough are the ones who are able to start looking for a way out of this problem, right? Those firms that brought their managers together and think and come up with a way out of this are the ones which have been seen to be not very much affected. But the ones that were found by the change, they didn't do anything. Maybe they just closed down or scaled down their business without any other strategy out of that, may have been badly affected. Now, for example, in our country here, let me talk in terms of the universities because that's where I am. Now, what happened is that immediately the universities were closed. University management started sitting down and discussing of ways to how to deal with this problem. Some were saying we use Zoom, others we use what. But within that sphere, an organization came up here in Kenya and provided a video conferencing platform, right? And you know, Zoom is foreign. The servers are in China. I don't know what is in America. Those are foreign firms that are now saving the world now. But in our case here, most of the universities, especially the public universities, they are using a local conferencing platform, right? No, not Zoom, but they are using a local conferencing platform. That came out because of this problem, because of this challenge, right? So what am I saying? You said we must always be on the lookout for local solutions, especially now in Africa. We've been depending so much on foreigners and so forth. As leaders in this continent, we need to start looking inwards and look for local solutions to our local problems. And that's the only way we can progress. But if we still wait for the Mzungus and the white people to bring us solutions, it may not be the case. We need to wake up. Our continent needs to wake up. See how we can be stepping up. Because the problems we're facing here are not same problems in the developed world. Our problems are different. Therefore, when we expect foreigners to solve our problems, we may not be doing the right thing. Well, they have helped us in some time, but they may not give us the best solution. So leaders in Africa, in Ethiopia, in Kenya, in parts of Africa, need to be always on the lookout of opportunities and threats to the market so that they can save their organizations. You've seen what is happening now with the medical equipment. First time when the virus was detected, China was making booming business. But why should you fly a mask from China to Africa? How many kilometers? How many miles? Right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So as leaders, we need to be able to watch the environment and try to solve problems as they come. You don't wait until a lot of damage has been done. Okay. Thank you. I think I'm clear. Are you comfortable now? It's clear.
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
want us to move to something else small. And this is about strategic leadership. The strategic leadership. This will be our last discussion. Just 1 minute here, and then now I want us to briefly talk about strategic leadership and see what are the interests here. And this is basically our last discussion. Now, what you need to know is what is the role of strategic leadership, and what's the role of teams, what's the role of management in managing the internal and external environment, what is the value of strategic leadership. I think these are the objectives you need to understand. See what is the role, what functions, what roles, what significant roles do managers perform under strategic leadership. The importance of strategic leadership in managing the firm's resources, very, very important. Discuss the importance and use of organizational controls, because leadership controls what is happening in the organization. What is the role of leaders in ethical management? Because ethics and leadership, we talked about corporate governance, is one and the same, it's a twin. So just briefly, we need to understand who is a leader before we go to strategic leadership. Who is a leader? Who is a manager? This discussion has been there for many years. Study is done. Some say a manager does this, a leader does this, director does this, a manager does this. But surely, how are they different? How is a leader different from a manager? Why not management leadership? Why not strategic management? Why strategic leadership? So basically, a leader is a person who establishes direction and mobilizes resources to be able to assist the firm to focus on its objectives. A person who produces change and movement, establishes direction, yes. The word direction, you will find it very, very much there, because leaders provide the direction to the organization. A person who influences, yes, giving direction is influences a group of people towards achievement of an organizational goal. And you can have so many leaders. I mean, so many definitions of what is leadership and what is a leader. So leadership is a process of social influence to maximize the efforts of the other people so that you can be able to achieve the goals and objectives. It's a process of persuasion. And social influence is persuasion, whereby one person takes the mandate and tries to guide the organization through some organizational processes until some results have been realized. So now strategic leadership, which is the role of the strategic leader, is the ability to make decisions, right, about strategy and tactics, right, and increase strategic intent and tactics and actions in the organization. The ability to make and implement consequential decisions. Yes, strategic leadership is a decision-making scenario. Very important, because you may do everything correct in an organization, but if you are lacking leadership, everything crumbles. You can have the capital, you can have the product, you can have the service, the best product in the market, but the leader is very, very important because the leader combines all the factors of the organization so that to get an output. That's why you find in most organizations, when organizations are not doing well, it is the leaders who are kicked out first, because it means in one way or the other they have failed in their duty, right? So that means that there is a lot that leaders do. Discussion going around, especially between employees and management. When employees say management, or managers for that matter, and for that matter leaders, don't work much, yet they are paid a lot. Employees who do the physical work themselves are paid less. That's a discussion between employees and management and so forth. But the work of the employees will be useless if there is no leadership. For the work of the employees to add value, then the work should add value towards the direction of the firm. It's like when you are pulling, you have two teams. One is pulling the ropes. Those games, I don't know whether you play them there. You have team A on this side and team B on this side, and everybody is pulling on a side. Unless one team has a direction it is pulling to, any pulling will have no meaning. You can as well pull against the others. But when there is direction, when there is leadership, then the best results, it's possible, you are able to get and register the best results. And that is what now leadership brings in organizations. Now we have the strategic leadership model, which is about anticipating, articulating, aligning, and assuring. Those are very, very important terms. You need to anticipate what is going on here. You have to anticipate. The leaders must anticipate that and tell the employees, this is what we are doing because we want to do this and this and this and this. And then you also have to do articulation. What needs to happen here? We want to change. We want to open a new branch. We want to move out of the country and invest in foreign markets. How do we make it happen? You have to show the strategies. How do we keep making it happen? How do you maintain? How do you maintain that organization? How do you maintain the organizational competencies or competitiveness in the industry? And that is assuring. The leaders must be there to assure everybody, right, that we are doing the right thing, and we continue doing it. And this will goes and goes and goes and goes around. That assurance alone is very important in an organization. It means that the leaders are in charge of what is happening there. Okay, that's the same explained there. So you can see a leader in the middle there trying to assure, anticipate, articulate, create direction, shared reality, set strategies, and then align, connect with the people, create conditions for success, and then assure. You assure the people it's going to happen. If we do this, it's going to happen. And therefore, strategic leadership starts with that's just a continuation of that model there. Develop the strategy, the vision, the mission, right? Translate that strategy into measurable targets. Plan the operations of the firm. Once you've done that, then communicate that. Monitor and learn. Then test and adapt strategy. This is purely a strategic leadership decision. Of course, inside there is you find stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. But at the end of the day, we are looking at the performance. All these strategic leadership action should make sure that there is profitability, for example. Our strategies are working, right? And so forth. At the end of strategic leadership, we also have strategic thinking. This is the process of identifying, imagining, and looking at possible ways of managing and operating within the environment. That is called strategic thinking. Trying to make sure that you are bringing the future of the organization by thinking big, by looking at the future, what you may call deep and long. So managers, as the leaders, as they are in the office, don't just take tea and be happy that things are going good. You should be talking about the future. In one of the organizations, one of the manager, one of the leader had been there for around 10 years, and he had built a very big office tower for the organization, up to 20 floors. So the organization was using some of the rooms, and then they had rent the others. They were bringing income. And therefore, after some time, that leadership left. The manager left, the CEO left, another CEO came in. And when the CEO came in, the day he was handed over, he was very happy. He had gotten his dream job to be the CEO of such a big organization. And he thanked the outgoing CEO, the one he was handing over to. And he said, "Thank you for building this big farm, and also building this big house with the 20 floors and above. You are surely strategic, and that is good for the organization." But the man who was handing over, he said only a few words. And he told him, "My friend, you are the one in charge here. Don't just come here and sit down and start enjoying yourself. We made a lot of sacrifices to have this building where it is because we are thinking about the future. So don't just come sit here, enjoy yourself, and grow fat. Instead, come here, sit here, and think about 10 years or 15 years when you'll be handing over. What will you be handing over? Will you be handing over what I've just given you? Or there will be something that you'll have done that you'll be handing over to the next generation of leaders? And that is what strategic thinking is all about. You must think ahead. You must look at you must think big. You must think deep. You must think long about where that organization will be in the near future. So it's forward, it's forward looking.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ MBA በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ MBA በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ MBA በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ MBA በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ MSc በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Maybe what are the skills that you need for strategic thinkers or strategic thinking skills that you may need for holistic, synthetic, these ones you can read. They're mostly some of the key skills and competencies for proper leadership: tactical, pragmatic, analytical, reasoning, future-oriented, yes, intuitive, creative, innovative, and so forth. We don't need to talk about that. Then there is also the strategic leadership model, the impact of strategic thinking to an organization's success. We are now deep into leadership. We want to see how does strategic thinking, which is part of strategic leadership, affect the organization's development. Of course, on top there you find mission, values, what, the stakeholders are there. You have the strategic goals, you have action plans, you have all this, implement plans, what. But at the end of the day, we are looking at the performance of that firm. At the end of the day, strategic leaders should look at the future. And that future should be better, right? It should be better than the one that is there. Okay. Now, infusing strategic leadership with strategy management process. We've gone through the process: vision, mission, strategies, implement, then evaluation and control. Strategy formulation, implementation, strategic analysis and choice, implementation, then control. Now, how does now leadership connect with the strategic management process? Because these leaders are supposed to work within that framework to be able to achieve this success we are talking about. Now, effective leadership shapes the formation of the vision and the mission, right? If the leaders are quite effective, their vision and mission will be articulate. And therefore, they also influence successful strategic actions. For example, strategy formulation. For example, strategy implementation, right? And that leads to, of course, that is the whole strategic planning process that leads to, it yields that implementation, that formulation implementation, it yields strategic competitiveness, which is competitive advantage now. So we are saying if you infuse strategic leadership in the strategic planning process, you are likely to reap big than where there is no strategic leadership. Okay, then still under that, to bring now the concept of scenario planning. It's part of strategic thinking, strategic leadership, And now the concept of scenario planning, again, you can see that man there is futuristic. That's the CEO of the firm, that is the strategic leader. He's looking about the future, the near future and the far future. That's why you have future 1, future 2, future 3, future 4, whatever. It goes and goes and goes. Now, the concept of strategic planning, I said, is for example, now in the diagram we've just gone, you've seen strategic leader, strategic thinking leader infuses the vision, the mission, the strategies. Now, if the leader is not astute enough, then he may lack that ability to infuse that. So the issue of scenario planning is a way of trying to bring the future, the imagined future of the organization, and see how that future can be realized. That's what I was saying. When the man was handing over, he was telling the other man, please, Don't just sit here, enjoy yourself, and grow fat. Think about what you are going to hand over 10 years when you'll be leaving this office. And that is what is now called scenario planning. You are looking at the future. You are looking at imagined future and see how you can be able to steer the organization through the strategic planning process to achieve that future that cannot be seen today, but you envisage. It's about thinking creatively about a possible, complex, and a certain future. You don't know about that future, but you can plan today. You can make decision making today about the future environment, right? So it's sometimes called scenario analysis. You are looking at scene. A scene is an event. For example, when you look at most businesses in the year 90s coming to 80s, some firms were planning how to do business in the 2000s. When you come to the 2000s, starting of the 2000, maybe up to 2010, businesses were doing scenario analysis of the next 10 years per se. How by 2020, the business will be operating. Today in 2020, those leaders who are doing scenario planning, they are envisaging a situation of 2030, 2040. Where will we be? What will we be doing? Right? And this is what this man is doing by looking into that future. That future can be 10 years, 15 years, and saying, okay, today we have this product, we have this service. We are appealing to this market, but in the future, where will we be? And how can we make it better for the organization so that the organization can be able to be competitive in the near future? That is what scenario planning is all about. Although we are using the past and the present, but our decisions are about the future. We are envisaging a situation whereby we are seeing a good future, and therefore we must create that future so that the farm can be there at that particular time. Maybe now this brings on the role of strategic leadership and style and what managers should do. Of course, they should anticipate and envision. That is now the diagram you've seen there, that man using, I don't know, it's a binoculars or what, trying to see the future. But as much as you are planning that future, you must maintain what? Flexibility and stability in the organization. Because if the organization is not flexible now, the organization is not stable, it cannot achieve that. If there is a lot of turbulence and those turbulences are not addressed, then that farm may not be able to reach that scene we are talking about. So that's the idea about strategic leadership and strategic thinking, making sure that the future is in the minds and the thoughts of the leaders. And not just sitting and fattening themselves in the chair, as that leader will say, but thinking about, working with others, making sure that the whole enterprise is focused on that, and using that as a managerial frame of reference so that even if leadership changes midway, then that reference is in the minds of the organization. The people who are there know where the organization wants to go because it is being properly communicated. So even if the CEO leaves after 1 year or 2 years, that does not mean that the organization should lose that focus. Because this leadership was being done on the organization. It was not a one-man show. And that's why you find the organization recruit leaders, recruit managers. But if within a certain short period of time, the manager is not able to buy and lead the organization in the right way, then that manager has to leave. Right? And that's why you find that in most organizations, they like inbreeding instead of outbreeding. Inbreeding means succession planning. Most organizations, actually, most successful organizations, they go for a succession planning, whereby you are the CEO, you have 3 deputies or 4 deputies. You groom them, and then at a particular time, you pick one to lead. Why? Because these people know the working of the organization, they know the scenario planning, they know what is envisaged, they know the future that is supposed to be there in 10, 20, 15 years. So they are better off to steer the organizations in that direction. But if you want change, if you are changing the organization, you are not running the course, then you go for outbreeding. You get a new person from outside who does not understand well the operations of the farm, because in the operation of the farm, there is there's conservativity, there is resistance. But a person who comes in may not have that conservativeness. So effective leaders must make sure that the farm's operations are effectively, there is high performance over time. If this lacks, then leaders must definitely exit organization. There is no need for them to stay there and fatten themselves when the organization is getting damaged. It should make better decisions than their competitors, and that's what brings competitive advantage. Must make candid, courageous, and pragmatic decisions and so forth. Understand their decisions affect the internal systems of the farm. Strategic change, organizational change. Maybe we can go directly to the management of resources. I want us to go to what exactly do strategic leaders do or managers do. Of course, they manage the resources of the organization. They manage the internal environment. Factors that affect or amount to the decision making include the external environment, very important. We'll discuss about this. Characteristics of the organization, yes. And we said if the farm wants to maintain the status road trip, then it looks for inbreeding, succession planning. It looks at the characteristics of the manager, right? If the farm wants to change, then it looks for a characteristic of manager who is change-oriented and so forth. Now, these are the factors affecting managerial decision: environmental, external environment, characteristics of the organization, the size of the organization. Big organizations are run differently. Small organizations are run differently. Very young organizations are completely run different from big or urged organizations. Organizations that are 100 years old, the one Conji was talking about, you completely will affect the kind of decision that management will make, culture, availability of resources, and so forth. Management discretion in terms of course, yes, and then we have characteristics of the manager: tolerance, commitment, interpersonal skills, social capital, all this, degree of self-confidence. They are going to affect managerial discretion. And these are the attributes that you check. If you're in the board of directors and you're recruiting a CEO, these are things that you check. You know, a good CEO needs to have those better characteristics. A lot of tolerance. He needs to be committed. He needs to have good interpersonal skills. When we are talking about relationships, we talked about inter-organizational and intra-organizational relations, external relations. We talked about social capital. A good CEO should have a good social capital, aspiration, degree of self-confidence. These are key things. Okay, these ones are explained under each one of these external environments, and you know, the industry structure, the market growth, how many competitors are there, right? For example, if you are in a market where there's market forces, free supply and demand forces, as compared you are in a monopoly, as compared you are in a monopsony, the decisions will be different. In a perfect market, you have to be very careful about the decisions you make because competition is very high. Competition is very tough. And the issue of substitution is also very high. In terms of characteristics of the organization, that is also age, culture, patterns of interaction, and so forth. Characteristics of manager, those are well explained there, degree of self-confidence, aspiration, interpersonal skills, and so forth. Managerial discretion is the extent to which the management has that ability to make that decision. Now, I want to go directly to the roles, the functions that the managers should do. Let me go. Okay, you can read much about these theories. I want to go to the CEO and top management team powers. What is the role of the CEO? CEO duality. I think all this you can study on your own. Okay, managerial succession, very important. Under strategic leadership, and we say that managers select, organizations select managers based on two managerial labor market. That's the internal managerial labor market and the external managerial labor market. Now, where you get the manager, where you get the leader is very important. If it is internal, then there is advancement opportunities, right? There is career growth and development, and people who are there, the other junior managers who are there are committed because they know at one time they can advance the opportunities. Now, if you bring a manager from outside, it's good, right, for the job. But what about the career advancement? You may lead to lack of commitment by the junior managers. An assistant manager, an assistant director would wish to be the director at one point. And therefore, if you cut their dreams halfway, or if they know that they cannot be the leader will always come from outside. Like what happens in most family-owned businesses, whereby the CEO must be a son or a daughter of the family. So even if they have employed assistant managers from outside, no matter how much they perform, they know that they can never be the CEO of that organization. And that is not good for the continuity of that firm. But where you are using succession planning and make sure that the lower level managers they grow up. Every employee wants to grow up from supervisor to ward up to the assistant manager to the director to the CEO of that organization. So now, the managerial labor market is very tricky. It is like those EPL, the likes of Samuel. You know how the managers are selected. It is a very tight decision because that simple decision of hiring or not hiring can make or break that organization. Right? Can make or break that organization. That's why you find managers who have always performed will always get a job in the industry. Because sometimes the firm does not have a lot of time to be even testing others, right? But if you use more of the managerial labor, the internal managerial labor market, it leads to lower turnover among existing personnel. That's what I was explaining, because they know they are going to grow in that organization. But if you continue looking for the external labor, you may find very good people are leaving because they know maybe their chances are not there. But of course, it's an advantage of the external labor market, bringing people with fresh mindset, people with fresh blood, right? If the organization has reached its peak, then it needs a fresh mindset who can start the organization further. Now, when you are choosing the CEO, you choose between the top management composition and the managerial labor market, right? For example, you can talk about internal CEO, that is succession, or external CEO that you get from outside, right? Now, if the top management team is homogeneous means the same, composition is similar, and then you are getting an internal CEO, then it means there is stability, and that is good for the organization. Any stability in the performance of an organization, especially big capitalized organizations, is very important. So that the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, maybe the investors and the customers, do not feel as if there is any change. Because if they feel there is some change coming, they may not be very comfortable because they don't know how that change will affect them. People have invested their millions, their customers have entrusted with that organization. Stable. Now, if the top management composition is heterogeneous, that is, it means it's different, and you look for an external CEO, then that is good for strategic change. Remember I said, if you want to change the organization, then it is more easy. It is more easy to bring an outsider to bring the change more than an insider. Most insiders, most internal succession planning is for stability. The firm is doing well, the term of the CEO has expired, or due to some reason the CEO has to exit, but what do? You maintain the status quo moving forward. But if there is homogeneity and you are looking at external CEO succession, it's ambiguous. You know, there's a possible change in the top management team and strategy. Now that is serious. Unless there's a big change, then you shouldn't go for that. Right? Unless your team is not performing well and your strategy is not performing well, then you don't go for that. And then when it is heterogeneous and there's an internal CEO succession, then fine. You can go for stable strategy with innovation. Remember, once you are using the CEO inside, it means there is stability. The moment you go outside, you bring either ambiguity or you want strategic change in that organization. What are the excess of effective leadership styles? Of course, we have a leadership, and then determine the strategic direction, establish balance controls. Now, one of the biggest functions of leadership is the controls. Controls are very important. We also discussed briefly about this when we are doing corporate governance. Then we talk about managing the human resource, then organizational culture, and then ethical practices. Right? These are very key, effective roles of effective strategic leadership. Determining the direction, that is number one. Strategic direction. Then establishing the organizational controls. You know, as firms become very big, controls become very important. Without controls, the firm will outwit itself and burn itself. Managing the firm's resource portfolio, very, very important. Resources have value, they are rare. If they are not properly managed, it will bring challenges. They'll be misused. They'll have no value. They'll not bring any competitive advantage to the firm. So the leadership must make sure that the firm's resources are properly managed. And then, of course, the culture. The culture now is about succession and continuity and stability. That's why when you have an internal succession plan, then transfer or continuation of organizational culture. But if you want to change the culture, then you get an outsider to be able to fix that culture. A person who has been benefiting from that culture for 10 years, 15 years, and he has learned the tricks, don't expect that person to change because he's now the CEO. He may not do it. Very few people can do that. I think in Africa, the president of Tanzania, people have said he managed that. Been in the system may not have been very good. And even when he was coming in, people are saying, okay, this is just a continuation of what has been happening. But I think he has done much to be able to change. Even though he was inside there, he was actually changing some of the things that he has benefited from because he's been a leader for quite some time. And then, of course, emphasizing on ethical practice is very, very important. This has to go with corporate governance, and it directly affects the performance of the firm. So these are the key strategic leader actions. That's the diagram I was explaining there. Very, very important. Determining the strategic direction. The manager must come with a long-term vision, 5, 10 years, goals, what, to be able to steer the organization ahead. And then exploiting and maintaining the core competencies, very, very important. We talked about core competencies and value creation, how to change resources into, assets into resources, into capabilities, into core competencies. That's the work of the leader. If he fails this, then the organization is done. Then developing and managing the human and social capital, very important. That's what we talked about in breeding, making sure that the people are trained, they have the right capabilities, the workforce is okay, compensation is okay, training and development is okay. If it comes to succession planning, it's fair, then the organization will be doing okay. And then social capital. Remember, this is one of the key qualities of a good leader. The relationship between the firm and the outside, including the leader himself. He must have enough social capital, because where do you do business? You do business with stakeholders, not yourself, right? So if you have good relations with stakeholders, your business will be okay. Then, of course, what else? Yeah. Then you have effective organizational culture. We've talked about this. Ideologies, symbols, values that are shared in the organization. It must be passed from one generation to another. Culture is transferred from one generation to another. And who does that? It is the leader to make sure that the culture of the organization is passed from one generation to the other. Of course, if it's a strong culture. Maybe the culture of innovativeness, the culture of risk-taking, it depends what culture is it, the culture of entrepreneurship and so forth. And then we also have emphasizing ethical practices. We've seen this. Ethics, we don't need to talk much about this. Establishing communication, ethical standards, code of conduct, engagement, ethical standards and practices. It's the role of the leader to make sure that this is happening in the organization. If that fails, the organization will. You've seen firms that are crashing because of poor corporate governance, because of poor ethical standards. And then, of course, lastly, establishing organizational controls. Very important. You need to manage the finance, so though it comes under resources. You need to manage financial, customer, internal processes. Let me see. Okay, for more information, controls help strategy leaders to build credibility. To demonstrate the value of strategies for the firm's stakeholders. The CEO should be in charge. That's what we are talking about here. He should be in control of the firm. Promote and support strategic change. And these are the controls we are talking about. Financial. You have to control cash flow. You have to control return on equity. You have to control return on assets. When the shareholders come to evaluate your work as a CEO, they look at that. How is the cash flow? Has it improved? Has it reduced? You must answer that as a CEO. How much did we give you and how much have you brought to us? That's the value of the firm. Very, very important. The customers, how are you meeting customer needs? Right? How effective is your service to this customer? What quality, what is the quality you are providing in this to these customers? What is the base? What is your customer base? And then we have internal processes, assets utilization and improvement. Remember the CEO again. Don't just sit here and fatten yourself. Also improve on these assets, the way other people did. And then take care of the employees, changes in turnover rates, and then learning and growth, very important also for the employees, improvements in innovation, creativity. Products. How many new products have you come up in the last 5 years, the last 10 years? What about your competitors? Then have you properly managed the skills? That is the human resource now. Okay. I need to do what I normally do at this time. I'm just reminding you that your mic is on. Right? Your mic's on or off? I'm not hearing anybody speak there.
We were off.
All right. So that means we've come to the end of that discussion. But how does a strategic leader differ from normal leadership? How does strategic leadership differ from normal leadership? We define who is a leader and who is a strategic leader. Explain the challenges facing strategic leadership. Okay. Maybe time is moving, but can we have one person to make a comment? Today being our last class. I don't know when the people will sing now, those who have never said anything. They'll sing when we make. I wanted to finish the class early so that we can give them time. It looks like the calls are time as Samrawit, you seem to be having network problems. Yes. Yes. Okay. What is your take? Can you hear people talk now? Okay, let me mute again, and then you can, if you want to talk now, you can raise up your hand. Okay, it's open for discussion. Yes, Samuel, your hand is up.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think the difference between the two, like when we talk of strategic leadership and then just taking leadership as a whole, I think the diagram, probably the picture you've shown us earlier on, the leader with the binoculars looking at the future would define it properly and maybe more than enough. Like a leader could be a good leader, but then doing it as of today and within the time frame he is leading. Whereas a strategic leadership, as defined in the definitions, it's a futuristic kind of leadership, whereby a leader is leading by example and maybe strategically, but then looking into the future and that he is futuristic kind of leader.
Right. That's okay. Let me see another person who is up. Can't see another person. No other person is up today. Okay, Shimeles, I think your hand is up.
To my understanding, it's not that much big difference, but though every leaders can be showing the direction and try to influence on all the people. But the strategic leadership is the one who try to see the future, thinking long term. So that is, and thinking, having strategic thinking, that is the main difference.
Yes, another person who can. Now the session is basically open, not just for this, but another comment that you want you want to raise, because this is our last class. Yes, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Okay, Shimalis has said that strategic leadership is about the long term. Yeah, it's true that it is a long-term leadership. But on top of that, strategic leadership, it's about leading by crafting strategies that can enhance the organization's objectives and that could help the organization achieve its objectives. Because simply leadership could be based on common sense or some kind of leadership on the will of the manager. But if it is a strategic leadership, it will employ strategies which will be outlined or summarized in the organization's report or goals. So strategic leadership is more than leadership because it incorporates strategies. It looks forward. I think it's forward-looking, but on top of that, it incorporates strategies by the manager. It's not solely based on common sense or based on the assumptions of the manager alone. It is more than that. That's what I say.
Okay, okay. Another. Now the forum is open for anything you want, not just the questions. Any issue about the class or anything? Yes, Jerusalem.
I think, sir, strategic, I think the tactical leadership is focused on the universal vision. It's focused on the universal vision, whereas the strategic leadership focus on specific tasks, a task which is done today, which is linked to the future vision. So I think the major difference between the two is strategic leadership is focusing on what we are doing today, which has, of course, a link for the future vision, whereas the tactical leadership is focusing on the universal vision. And I think it's a matter of scope. Thank you.
Right. That's true. Another comment, I'm trying to go through here to see another comment, none. Okay, see the chat. Now, please, could you give us one or more sample strategic plan from your experience, just to summarize and understand what we have discussed in class today? No, I'm not understanding this well. Yared, is Yared in? I'm not getting your question well because you're saying, can you give us one or more example? Is it an example of a strategic plan from your experience, just to summarize and understand what we have discussed in class today? Okay, I'm not clearly getting this question. Yes, somebody hand this up. Please, can you go ahead?
I have a question, Chair.
Yes,
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. You clarified about strategic leadership action in the middle of your lecture. So, is it about formulating and implementing a business plan? Because you said that it incorporates the mission and vision statements. It also incorporates the strategic action. So, is it something about formulating and implementing a business plan? Because business plan and strategic plan are used interchangeably most of the time.
ልዩነት መፍጠር ዓላማችን ነው። ዓለም አቀፍ ተወዳዳሪ መሆን አለባችሁ። የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ጥራትና ደረጃውን የጠበቀ ስልጠና በመስጠት ብቁ ዜጋ እያፈራን ነው። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆቴልና ቱሪዝም ሙያዎች አሰልጥነን ተወዳዳሪ እናደርጎታለን። ኮሌጃችን ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ICM ጋር በመተባበር ዓለም አቀፍ ዕውቅና ያለው ስልጠና እየሰጠ ይገኛል። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን በበረራ መስተንግዶ የምንሰጣቸው ስልጠና ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና አለው። አድራሻ ከጎላጉል ታወር 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ህልሞን